It's very difficult to introduce Taxi Driver in very few words because it's the film that literally changed my life, and it completely, like, single-handedly changed the way I could look at cinema. So it was a very inspiring film for me. It is a very inspiring film for me. I keep going back to it once in a while, and I keep drawing a lot out of it. In a way, I was shocked that someone can act so natural on film, that someone can be so interesting in being so ordinary, in having such a mundane lifestyle, but can be a character with whom you feel a brotherhood, and you still feel that there is so much agony in that character that you cannot ignore it.
Hi Harshal, welcome back to my podcast, which is called Spoiler Alert with me, Cinephile Sanket. So Harshal, in this episode, I think we're discussing one of your all-time favorite films, which is called Taxi Driver, which is directed by Martin Scorsese, which is written by Paul Schrader, and which stars Robert De Niro, Harvey Keitel, and and Jodie Foster and Sybil Shepherd. So, first of all, Harshal, how are you? And please introduce this film, and then please introduce yourself as well.
My name is Harshal. I'm an aspiring filmmaker. I'm a huge cinephile, and for me, it's very difficult to introduce Taxi Driver in very few words because it's the film that literally changed my life, and it completely, like, single-handedly changed the way I could look at cinema. So it was a very inspiring film for me. It is a very inspiring film for me. I keep going back to it once in a while, and I keep drawing a lot out of it. And it's not just on the cinematic level, but on the personal level as well. It's very influential for me, and very it's a film that I say is the greatest film ever made, in my opinion, because it's the most psychologically immersive film I've ever watched. So it's like you constantly see yourself in that film. When that happens, you have to give credit to that film, that it's the biggest masterpiece ever. I guess that could summarize what I feel about this film.
So, Harshal, when did you watch this film for the first time? When did you watch Taxi Driver? And then, when did you rewatch? Like, I think, how was your experience, first of all, when you watched it for the first time? And when you rewatched this film, I think the reason being this film being the greatest film, according to you, like, when you rewatched it, you might have felt like on every rewatch you might have felt something else. So, like, just tell me all about it. Like, what did you feel in every rewatches?
I watched it the first time in, I think it was around 2010, 2009, 2010. I was pursuing engineering, software engineering, and I was also going to a lot of, like, those were my formative years as an artist, and a cinephile, because I met a few people at the engineering college who really showed me world cinema, and the way cinema can be art form. That's when I started looking at it in a very different way. And when I watched Taxi Driver, I believe it was like really late night, and that's how everyone watches Taxi Driver. I came out completely stunned. I felt like the moment I finished that film, I felt a lot of kinship, a lot of relatability with Travis Bickle's character, the main character of the film, and it just spoke to me in a very different way. The way we all feel there's something wrong with the world, and someone should fix this world, and there are a lot of wrong things around us, and we feel compelled to take some kind of an action. It's always like an internal struggle. So that felt very, very personal, and that was one aspect of it. The other aspect was the whole atmosphere of that, the way film just takes you inside the mind of Travis Bickle. And at that, I think in that first watch, I didn't understand that. I didn't really realize that's what the film did to me. But over the time, I started realizing why that first watch was so effective, why it had such a profound effect on me. That's the reason why it's so immersive psychologically. So to it relates back to all the subsequent watches that I have had of that film. And over the time, as I've started becoming more and more interested in the techniques of filmmaking and seeing filmmaking as a craft, and the way directors construct a film, directors and all the technicians and all the artists involved, the way they construct a film for a particular effect, psychological or intellectual effect. I've grown to appreciate all the different aspects of filmmaking in that one film, Taxi Driver. The way Martin Scorsese has made a lot of unconventional choices in that film, that really becomes like a huge film school in a sense. That becomes how you can break the rules and still achieve a very particular emotional effect, how you can use conventions, and how you can use all these different elements like narration, camera tracking, zooming in, zooming out, how you can use all of that. That becomes that almost becomes a guide for a filmmaker to follow upon, and add a subtext to a text. you know so I feel, and that's why it's such an influential film for so many filmmakers like Anurag Kashyap. you know there are filmmakers who became filmmakers because of Taxi Driver, and there's like a huge legacy of that. That's a completely separate legacy of Taxi Driver, in a sense that it inspires a lot of filmmakers. you know so that's why it's such a special film for me, for a lot of other artists, for so many other cinephiles. I think that's a very big aspect of it. And so when I watched it again this time, I looked at it from I've been a really huge Scorsese fan, that.
Yeah.
So I've seen every film he has made, and that includes all the non-fiction he's made. I've even watched like a 15-20 minute like a promo documentary he made for Giorgio Armani. I've watched everything that he has directed, he's been part of. So I this time when I watched it, I was trying to put it in a context of what is Scorsese's style and what is his way of filmmaking. And I saw that it's not a very clinical Scorsese film on editing part, like the way it was like the way he was with Goodfellas and Casino, or even right after Taxi Driver. He made New York, New York, which is sort of forgotten musical, which is a really good musical in my opinion. But starting from Raging Bull, starting from his proper collaborations with Thelma Schoonmaker, there is a very clinicalness in his editing. Like there is not a one frame off. It's like it's an experience. It's a very exuberant experience. So I when I compared Taxi Driver with his output from Raging Bull onwards, I saw that Taxi Driver is not that perfect, with editing, but that also adds up to its charm because it's a mood piece. It's like when you're in someone's head, it's very unpredictable where his or her thoughts will go. Even our thoughts, like we listen to a song, we enter into a bad mood, we listen to something else, or we read something, or we watch something else, and our mood changes. So it's very unpredictable where what we're going to think next, and how we are going to feel the next day. So that helps, that clinicalness, the absence of that clinicalness helps in this film being a lot more moody and a lot more unexpected, and like sort of a free flowing diary, uh, the way it is structured as a diary, and also like he's sort of a taxi driver who goes anywhere. He rides anywhere he goes. He takes any kind of passenger. So
Anytime,
it
anywhere.
yeah, that's like his slogan. So it relates into all of that. So that's why I also feel like, even if Scorsese is not being too intentional about these things, uh, that helps in this becoming a lot more relatable film, and a lot more a film that will take you inside, instead of dictating something
Hmm.
outwardly to you. So that's what I realized in this watch, which was like another, in a very different way, a profound watch,
Wow.
as a filmmaker especially. Yeah.
I actually remember watching this for the first time. I couldn't remember when I watched this, but whenever I watched this, I like what I did was I actually Googled the president's the guy who was running for the president,
Yeah.
Palestine. No, sorry,
Charles Palantine.
Palantine, yeah. So I googled that name and I thought he was a real guy.
Hmm.
So back then in I think 2016, 2017, I didn't know what is it like, what's America like who were the presidents or who were the senators back then. But I still don't know, but like some of them I know, but I didn't knew who were like all those people. So I just googled them. That's actually the only memory I have when I watched this film for the first time. But the loneliness angle actually it stuck to me. Whenever
Yeah.
I feel lonely, I actually rewatched this film, like not in the entirety, but just some moments of it. Whenever he actually just goes into a Pond theater, or just rides taxi all around Brooklyn or all around in New York. uh,
Yeah.
so that's actually the only memory of this film I think I would have it. But still I loved it because it's a pure New York film. uh
Yeah.
it
That's
showed like
also
exactly, and I love those filmmakers like Scorsese and Noah Baumbach and all those people who actually make a film about their own city. And I love those guys. And I see very rarely those filmmakers who make films about my city as well. Like I think contemporarily sorry, contemporarily right now, in the last like 20-25 years, RGV and Anurag Kashyap and Akhtar, all those guys made some amazing films about my city. But
yeah.
I don't know, like people haven't made that much like that many films which these guys Noah Baumbach and like Martin Scorsese and all those people have made about their city. And and the fact, so in this viewing actually I got to know that the city of New York was actually like a big role in itself. It had a big role
Yeah.
in itself because like all those like Scorsese is a master of detailing, I think, because in every scene we can see that okay, in a theater a Texas Chainsaw Massacre is playing. So he
Yes.
can like he actually gave us the reference of what which the timeline this film is set in.
Yeah.
So like, and that's the reason I like this film so much actually. But I actually wanted to ask you, how did you feel like Robert De Niro's acting? Like, how did you feel about his acting?
Yeah. That was a really big part of the profound effect I had the first time I watched it, because I was an aspiring actor at that point of time. I was very religiously following theater and very interested in method acting. And I was reading Stanislavski's method of acting. I was getting very involved, very uh, intellectually involved in that. And when I watched Robert De Niro act like that, I was in a way I was shocked that someone can act so natural on film, that someone can be so interesting in being so ordinary, in having such a mundane lifestyle, but can be a character with whom uh, you feel brotherhood, and you still feel that there is so much agony in that character that you cannot ignore it, you know. And before that, all we had seen like people being really dramatic in films to achieve some kind of an effect, and you don't see that much drama around you in your ordinary day-to-day life. There is subtlety, but there are emotions, there is drama, there are things that you did not expect, there are like feelings, and nobody really acts about them, nobody really like shows them in in such an outburst, like um, if I have to give I mean, basically Bollywood, the way Bollywood films show you how emotion is expressed, and the way Travis Bickle was showing emotions, and his basically his cry for help, and his longing for connection. Uh, so that really made me realize that that's how people are making that. Those are the kinds of also films that exist in the world. You know, people are taking so much interest and seriousness in portraying a character that is that may just be like someone who's standing right next to you and you don't really care about him or her, that kind of characters. People are taking so much effort in portraying that very authentically. So I immediately took a liking in Robert De Niro, and I started following his other films so very interestingly, so very with a lot of energy and with a lot of focus. And that's why I felt like Taxi Driver is also set apart in a lot of films, because his acting, everyone's acting basically, Harvey Keitel, Jodie Foster, Sybil Shepherd is also like a very particular kind of woman in that, but it's not that she's been a stereotype of a woman, but it's the way Travis sees her. It's the way Travis expects her to behave and expects her to be his companion. That's the way we see her actually. So
That's the
whenever we
way
watch,
the entire film is we see through his eyes itself. So that's the
yeah,
like all the characters we see through his eyes. So yeah, you said it like very correctly right now.
yeah, that's one of the things we need to keep in mind when watching Taxi Driver, because it can be very controversial at times, that we are seeing this film, from a very subjective perspective. We are seeing it from Travis. So there was a controversy about how it portrays Black people. So it was said that the film is racist. But I think the difference is that Travis is sort of a racist guy who looks at Black people and who thinks that they are like a threat to him. And we are shown from his perspective that he thinks that they are a threat to him. It's not uh, like a universal statement that Black people may be a threat to someone. It's so that's where it's like a double-edged sword, where it gets also kind of misunderstood. Uh, the way it's portraying a lot of different things. And New York still is a very dirty city. New York still, there's a lot of crime in New York. People just look at, people see Times Square and people think it's like it's like utopia in a sense, but it's definitely not a utopia. Like if you go to Times Square, it smells so bad. um, so to me also, like New York, the way New York is captured in this film is also very authentic. uh, when i uh, when I came to New York in 2018, I've been living here for more than 3 years now, and I still keep going back to the way Taxi Driver portrays New York, because it's a very specific character of New York that a lot of people choose not to see. And that's why it's so important that city plays like a character in itself. Because whenever you come to, if you start living in New York, you have a very strong relationship with it. When you love New York, you love it with all your heart. When you hate New York, you hate it with like total anger. So you always have a very very strong relationship with the city, and I think it reflects in that film too, that why it could happen, why this film is so deeply rooted as a New York film, why it's such an essential New York film.
Mhm.
you know
But actually, I want to add a point where, like, when I rewatched it many times, some scenes, I actually found out that the the guy who wrote this film, Paul Schrader, he made a film called First Reformed, and I was curious to like watch this film because I like someone that told me that it's a good film, and he actually told me that, oh, this is a film by the guy who wrote a Taxi Driver. I was like, okay, I'll watch it. And then when I watched it, okay, wow, like I was blown away. I was shocked, and like those were there were very similarities in First
Mm.
Reformed and Taxi Driver. Like there were many essences we could find in First Reformed, and I didn't think it that way, that okay, that's it's like a copy, it's like inspired from a Taxi Driver, but uh, like I was thinking, wow, finally I could find a film which is very similar to this very similar to Taxi Driver. And like I love that character, that Reverend, which and even that Reverend and Travis Bickle, the character, has very much similarities, as you just mentioned, that like both of these characters actually feel that the world is a dying place, like all those corrupt people are just winning and winning. Someone has to do something, and like actually in the film First Reformed, Ethan Hawke's character actually says that well, someone has to do something. So I actually was glad that I could see something, I could watch something which is very similar to Taxi Driver. But I actually wanted to ask you, were like, did you find any other similarities in our contemporary films? I know Joker actually, it took much inspiration from Taxi Driver, obviously, and King of Comedy. But which other films did you actually find similar, like inspirations from Taxi Driver?
I don't really remember any recent film that maybe, I mean, apart from First Reformed, that may throw back to Taxi Driver so much. But that may be because I actively avoid the films that are inspired by that. But I do want to say the similarity of themes is a trajectory in both Paul Schrader and Martin Scorsese's filmographies, because you see, they have been collaborators. They have made 4 or 5 films together. Uh, Paul Schrader also wrote a draft of Raging Bull. Paul Schrader also wrote a draft of Last Temptation of the Christ. Paul Schrader also wrote Bringing Out the Dead, which is a very similar to Taxi Driver film by Martin Scorsese. But again, I look at it very different. It has a really amazing Nicolas Cage performance, and it's also very you should watch it. It's very New York and it's very Taxi Driver, but distinct films still. Uh, they have been collaborators since a long time, and they've both been raised Catholic, I think, and they've been deeply interested in the Bible and the different things that different stories that are told in the Bible, and basically the masculinity and sort of a God complex. So in Taxi Driver, what we have is that is Travis Bickle thinks that he's the most righteous man, he's the most moralistic man in the world, and he tries to turn the world to his ways. So that was also a very key factor in The Last Temptation of Christ, which was a very controversial novel and the most controversial film that Scorsese ever made. He received a lot of death threats over that. And so it's really funny to me when people say that Scorsese doesn't take risks. It's like the most ridiculous statement ever.
He even took risk in silence, making silence as well.
Yeah, making silence. Yeah. So Silence also has like a guy who starts thinking that maybe he's Jesus. So the narration and all of these things come together. That's the recurring theme. Gangster films are not the recurring theme in Martin Scorsese's filmography. It's this kind of a God complex where males basically think that they want to turn the world their way, and they are trying to make sense of the world and at the same time trying to make sense of what's going on inside their head. So in The Last Temptation of Christ, it becomes a lot clearer that Jesus Christ is actually hearing something, and he's not sure what he's hearing. Like he feels a voice coming from inside that he's Son of God. So it's a very controversial statement to say. It's a very difficult thing to say when so many of people believe that he was Son of God. So with Taxi Driver, I think there is and that's why the writing of Taxi Driver is so clever. There is a line where Travis Bickle says that, I believe someone should not dedicate their life to morbid self-attention, which is a very ironic statement to say because he is becoming very self-obsessed and he's like writing that, he's saying that out loud. It's like a narration, and basically he is so much self-obsessed that he doesn't understand he's like, he's doing the opposite, basically what he's saying out loud. So that's why I also feel, and the way I want to say is that Scorsese is an auteur. So he's bending the script to his directorial sensibilities, So the way I could say that basically First Reformed and Taxi Driver are very similar scripts. And then you see First Reformed as a completely different kind of directorial film, which is drawing a lot from Robert Bresson and Ingmar Bergman. It's basically copying a lot from Robert Bresson and
even Pavel Pawlikowski as well. Like he actually got inspired to shoot in the 16:9, like the Academy ratio of because Pavel Pawlikowski made Ida, and he saw Ida and then decided to shoot that 4:3 exactly. 4:3, so yeah, that's the reason. But
so, I don't really. That's why there is a ingenuity into Taxi Driver's directorial sensibilities, which I don't find in First Reform. That's why I don't like First Reform. But yeah, it's also ironic that Paul Schrader says that First Reform is like one of the best films of the year. Like he picks his own films as top 10 best films of the year list. And then he's talking about these characters who are self-obsessed, which basically reflects that he is self-obsessed. So it's a very entangled thing, which I don't like to spend too much time on. But I want to say, what I want to say with Taxi Driver is that Taxi Driver is combining a lot of sensibilities from French New Wave, and also the films of Ingmar Bergman, where
Okay.
there are like, you know, a lot of like extreme close-ups, and actors are like really the prime focus of that story. And but Scorsese's influences are like a huge range, like very wide range, where he's like turning the camera away. He's making some very unconventional choices, like, and these are the moments that stand out with you and they stay with you.
But I think
Just the other day,
one actually scene was also inspired by The Third Man, right? The medicine falling into the water.
yeah, it's more from Jean-Luc Godard's Two or Three Things I
I
Know
hate her.
About Her.
Okay, yeah.
Two or three things I know about her has a very peculiar scene in the film where a guy is just smoking cigarette, and he has a coffee. He has a cup of coffee in front of him, and there is a voiceover that is dude. We don't know who that narrator is. You know, it's actually Godard speaking himself, but he just goes into like, what is the universe, what is going on. He goes into a completely cosmic kind of discussion, and it's very unconventional, because and then it's like it's just a stream of thoughts inspired by looking at a cup of coffee. And so that's why we zoom into the cup of coffee. And so Scorsese always, what I like about Scorsese is that, you know, even when he's stealing, he extends these influences. So with Taxi Driver, it becomes like a slow zoom into that glass of aspirin, where we start going inside Travis Bickle's head. That's when it's really direct, and it becomes clear that we are looking at the world from his point of view. And we were just discussing that scene last week with my boss. I was trying to edit something, and he was trying to guide me. And we got into the very basic of editing, very basic of filmmaking. You know, he asked me, what is the thing that people appreciate when watching some kind of a video? And I was like, you know, maybe I was talking about, maybe it's more of the visual information, etc. He said it's change. What we are more interested in, how things change, you know, over the time. So sometimes, a lot of times, you know, to keep people engaged, you need to keep them things changing. You need to show them that things are changing. But sometimes, you know, the static, the repetitive thing becomes an information. For example, that scene in Taxi Driver where we just keep zooming into that glass of water with aspirin in it. And, you know, at first, in the first second itself, we understand that, okay, it's a glass of water with aspirin in it. He's taking it for the headache. But it goes on. And so we start thinking why we are shown it
It also
repetitively.
cuts to his close up, like his dolly
Yeah,
shot as well. So we like
yeah,
we actually know we actually knew I actually knew that it has some meaning to it, because I don't know, like, because Scorsese doesn't do anything for just like that. Like it has
yeah.
it might be some reason he chose to like zoom into his face as well and zoom into that glass of water as well.
Yeah.
That I actually liked about that as well.
Yeah, so these are really specific choices that add to the mood, that also have a form and a function, like, you know, and it works on multiple layers. You know, as if you watched it as a filmmaker, you know, you see that he's trying to uh, get you inside that head of Travis Bickle. If you just watch it as a casual viewer, you know, you get gripped into that mood of that aesthetic of film, where it's like, you know, it's slow, and it's like uh, it's observing things around itself, you know. So that's why I feel it's very much a Scorsese film. Even
Mhm.
though I have a friend who makes a comment that it's a film with multiple authors, like Paul Schrader is one of the authors, Michael Chapman, the great cinematographer, is one of the authors. Scorsese is definitely an author. Robert De Niro is an auteur in his own right because of the way he has crafted that character, because of the way he has portrayed that character. It's so inseparable from that film, you know. And Bernard Herrmann is another big auteur of that film, who's the musician, who's the music director of that film. Which I say that, you know, but Scorsese's unconventional choices make him as like the final authority on every scene and every frame. I feel, you know, the way, you know, the conversation that Taxi Driver, the conversation that Travis is having with Betsy after their bad date, you know, and we are on Travis, and we see the camera move, you know, which is very, you nobody does that in a film. If you have an information, you're gonna show that information because we think of it as a visual medium, right? So when moving that, you are sort of denying that information, but that information is still going on in your ears as you're listening to it. But what it's saying that, you know, the director is basically the sympathizing with the character and it's moving away because it's such a heartbreaking scene to watch, to him basically pleading her, and at the same time the violence at the end is not something that Travis or the director is shying away from. You know, that's like the gritty reality for Travis. But this part where he's just talking with that girl he really likes, it's so heartbreaking. You know, so that's how the subtext works in film. That's why I feel like Scorsese really extrapolates that in Taxi Driver, and that's why it's such an influential film.
But can you have you had any Scorsese merchandise with you? Like
I
just show
have,
it to me, bro.
it's literally like, you know, I'm so big on, I got this from Mubi. These are the stickers I got at some event from Mubi, and I immediately posted one on my phone. I have a lot of books. Like I was trying to read this before our discussion, but I was just really busy. This is like a BFI Film Classics book from about Taxi Driver. They have this series of books about one particular films, like, you know, like a series of films, and it's like one scholar talks about one film in like these short books, which I'm really excited to read. I'm a huge Scorsese fan, so I have this Sight and Sound magazine auto series kind of issue. I also have the Godard one, but I really hope they do Agnes Varda's
Wow.
special next. I'm a huge fan of Varda as well.
Wow.
But yeah, I'm big on Taxi Driver.
But yeah, thank you so much, Harshal, for coming back to my podcast. Like it's been like it's been a great feeling having you back and and this time talking about the best film of all time according to you. Like I actually like talking about like films and talking to people who like that, like love those films which are one of the greatest films of all time for them. So yeah, thank you so much for finally for coming to my podcast.
Thank you so much, Sanket, for again inviting me, for letting me talk about Taxi Driver, which is like such a personal subject for me. I feel so happy that, you know, our discussion goes out to other people and they also discuss and maybe see the things in that film differently and find something new, because I think it's a really rich film and people should rewatch it and always find something new, you know.
Absolutely, sure thing. But yeah, thank you so much, Harshal, and I'll see you soon. Goodbye.
Yeah, bye, Sanket.